The river between Dry Hollow and Red Mesa was not the widest in the territory, but it was the most stubborn. It roared through jagged stone like it had something to prove, churning white against black rock, daring any man to cross it without consequence. For 20 years, it had served as a border, not just of land, but of pride. Walter Hale arrived at sunrise. He rode in from the Eastern Trail with dust on his boots and a rolled stack of blueprints strapped behind his saddle. He wasn't dressed like a politician or a soldier. He looked like a working man, broad shoulders, steady eyes, and hands roughened by timber and iron. He had built bridges across canyons and floodplains. But this one, he'd been warned, would be different. Dry Hollow hired him. Red Mesa didn't want him. Walter dismounted near the riverbank and stared at the rushing water. He could already see the natural anchor points in the stone. Solid foundation, good depth. It could be done. "What you looking at so hard?" Walter turned to see a rancher from Dry Hollow standing a few yards away, arms crossed. "Future road," Walter replied calmly. The rancher spat into the dirt. "That river keeps Red Mesa where they belong." Walter didn't answer. He had heard that tone before in other towns. Rivers had a way of turning fear into tradition. By midday, Walter began surveying. Hammer strikes echoed against stone as he marked foundation points. Some men from Dry Hollow helped. Others just watched. Across the river, Red Mesa watched too. And that was when he first saw her. She stood on a small rise overlooking the water, skirts brushing the tall grass. The morning sun caught in her dark hair as the wind pulled it loose from its pins. She didn't hide her stare. She studied him, openly, thoughtfully. Walter paused, even from a distance. There was something steady about her posture. Not defiant, not afraid. Curious. Later that afternoon, Walter crossed by the old ferry platform to deliver a formal notice to Red Mesa's council. The town was louder than Dry Hollow music, drifting from the saloon, wagon wheels grinding over hard-packed dirt. Inside the small schoolhouse at the edge of town, he found her again. Mary Callahan. She stood before a chalkboard, sleeves rolled slightly, explaining arithmetic to a room of children who looked half interested and half restless. When she noticed Walter in the doorway, she didn't falter. She finished the lesson before dismissing the class. The children rushed past him, whispering. Mary approached slowly. "You're the bridge builder," she said. Her voice was calm, but guarded. "Walter Hale," he replied. "I was told I should inform Red Mesa officially. Construction begins tomorrow." She folded her arms lightly. "You're aware not everyone here wants that. I've gathered as much, and yet you're staying." "Yes, ma'am." She studied him carefully, as though measuring more than his words. "That river has kept this town safe," she said quietly. "Safe from Dry Hollow's grudges, but it's kept Dry Hollow just as safe from yours." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Mary's lips almost curved. Almost. "You don't sound like a man trying to pick sides." "I'm not here to pick sides," Walter answered. "I'm here to build something neither side can knock down." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, though the sky remained clear. Mary stepped closer to the doorway, looking toward the river. "If you build that bridge, you'll be standing in the middle of a storm." Walter met her eyes. "I've stood in worse." Something flickered their respect, perhaps. Or concern. "Just be careful, Mr. Hale," she said softly. "Bridges can fall." He tipped his hat. "Only if no one believes in them." As he walked back toward the ferry, Walter felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a contract anymore. It wasn't just lumber and nails. It was Mary. It was two towns, too stubborn to speak. And it was a river that had grown comfortable being a wall. Tomorrow, the first beams would rise. And with them, trouble. The first beam went up under a sky, the color of burnished steel. Walter stood knee-deep in cold river water at dawn. Trousers rolled and boots braced against slick stone, directing the placement of the main support posts. The current pushed hard against the men working beside him, as if the river itself resented the intrusion. "Hold it steady," Walter called over the roar. "Drive it straight, or we'll regret it come winter. Dry Hollow sent 6 men. Red Mesa sent 4 and they kept their distance from the others, even as they hauled the same ropes. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. Every instruction Walter gave was watched carefully, weighed for favoritism. If he corrected a Red Mesa carpenter, Dry Hollow muttered approval. If he praised a Dry Hollow hand, Red Mesa eyes narrowed. By midday, the first vertical supports stood firm against the current. Walter climbed onto the temporary platform and wiped sweat from his brow. He allowed himself one brief moment of satisfaction. Then he saw her. Mary stood on the Red Mesa side near the ferry landing, skirts gathered slightly to avoid the mud. She carried a small wooden basket in one hand. When she noticed Walter looking, she hesitated, then stepped onto the ferry. Murmurs followed her crossing. She ignored them. When she reached the construction platform, she set the basket down and spoke clearly. "Lunch, for anyone who wants it." The workers exchanged glances. No one moved at first. Then one of the younger men from Red Mesa stepped forward. After a beat, a Dry Hollow ranch hand followed. Soon, men from both towns stood shoulder to shoulder, eating bread and salted beef from the same basket. Walter watched Mary carefully. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't trying to charm anyone. She was simply refusing to let the divide remain comfortable. "You're stirring things up," Walter said quietly when they stepped aside. Mary looked at the river. "It's already stirred." A shout interrupted them. 2 men, one from each town, were arguing near the supply wagon. "That timber's warped," the Dry Hollow man accused. "It was straight when we loaded it." The Red Mesa carpenter shot back. Walter moved quickly between them. "Enough," he said firmly. The carpenter crossed his arms. "Ask him who cut it. Probably crooked from the start." Walter inspected the beam himself, running his hand along the grain. "It's not warped," he said evenly. "It swelled from the water. That's on me. I should have had it covered." Both men fell silent. Mary noticed the subtle shift. Walter hadn't blamed either side. Later, as the sun dipped lower and the day's work ended, Mary remained by the riverbank. "You could have let them fight," she said. Walter removed his gloves slowly. "And lose the bridge on day 1. She studied him carefully. "You carry this like it's more than a job." He hesitated before answering. "When I was younger," he said quietly, "my father tried to build a grain route between 2 towns that hated each other. They sabotaged it before it was finished. A year later, a drought came. They needed that route." Mary's expression softened. "What happened? Too much pride. Not enough cooperation. People went hungry." The river rushed between them, louder now in the fading light. "So you're trying to fix more than timber," she said. "Yes." A breeze lifted her hair, and for a brief moment, the tension of the day faded. But not for long. That night, Walter walked the unfinished frame alone to inspect the supports. Something felt wrong. When he reached the center beam, he knelt and ran his lantern light along the wood. A clean notch cut into the base. Deliberate. Not deep enough to collapse it immediately, but enough to weaken it. Walter's jaw tightened. Sabotage. Footsteps sounded behind him. Mary. She had followed at a distance. She saw his expression before she saw the cut. "They've started already," she whispered. Walter stood slowly, staring at the dark river below. "Yes." Mary's voice trembled, though she fought to steady it. "If this turns violent." "It won't," Walter said firmly. But he wasn't entirely certain. He turned to her. "If anyone asks, you don't know about this." She lifted her chin. "I won't hide from it." "I'm not asking you to hide," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to stay safe." For the first time, the space between them felt charged. Not just with tension, but with something warmer, something dangerous in its own way. "You can't hold both towns together alone, Walter," Mary said softly. "No," he admitted, "but I can try." Behind them, the river kept roaring, and somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching. The bridge had risen one day into the sky, but now it stood under pressure from water, from pride, and from people who would rather see it fall. The notch in the beam was repaired before sunrise. Walter worked alone at first light, replacing the weakened section before the crews arrived. He said nothing of it when the men gathered. Instead, He assigned tasks with quiet authority, watching faces carefully. Someone had tried to cripple the bridge, and that someone was still among them. The work continued, but the mood had changed. Laughter was gone. Even the sound of hammering seemed sharper, angrier. By midday, a rumor spread like dry brush catching flame-red Mesa men were planning to pull out of the project. Dry Hollow's mayor had allegedly demanded full control of the finished bridge. Walter confronted the mayor that afternoon. "If I made no such demand," the man insisted. "But if Red Mesa thinks they'll control access to our trade routes, they're mistaken. And if Dry Hollow thinks they'll toll Red Mesa into submission," Walter replied evenly, "they're mistaken too." The mayor frowned. "You're forgetting who hired you." Walter held his ground. "No, sir. I remember exactly who hired me. But this bridge won't stand if it belongs to only one side." That evening, Walter crossed to Red Mesa. The saloon fell quiet when he entered. He felt the weight of their suspicion settle over him like dust. Mary sat near the window again, papers untouched before her. "They're saying Dry Hollow plans to claim the bridge as theirs," she said before he could speak. "And Dry Hollow says the same about Red Mesa." Mary let out a weary breath. "It's like we need the anger to survive." Walter sat across from her. "Anger's easier than trust." She looked at him carefully. "And what's easier for you? Loyalty to the town that hired you, or fairness to the one that didn't?" The question struck deeper than she intended. "I gave my word to build a bridge," he said quietly. "Not a weapon." Mary's gaze softened, but her voice remained steady. "You're standing in the middle of two lines drawn in sand. Eventually, someone will demand you step to one side." Walter didn't answer, because she was right. The next morning, the conflict erupted. A supply wagon carrying iron bolts from Red Mesa arrived late. A Dry Hollow foreman accused the driver of intentional delay. Voices rose. A shove followed, then a punch. Within seconds, men from both towns were fighting in the dirt beside the half-finished bridge. Walter rushed in, pulling men apart, taking blows meant for others. "Stop this," he roared. No one listened until a gunshot split the air. Not aimed at anyone, just fired skyward. Silence crashed down. Mary stood at the edge of the sight, revolver trembling slightly in her grip. Her eyes were fierce, furious. "Look at yourselves," she said, voice shaking but loud. "You're fighting over a bridge meant to connect you." No one moved. Walter slowly took the revolver from her hand, lowering it gently. "That's enough for today," he said firmly. The crews dispersed, bruised and ashamed. As the dust settled, Walter turned to Mary. "You shouldn't have done that, and you shouldn't have to bleed for this alone," she shot back. They stood inches apart now, both breathing hard. "If this continues," she said, "someone will get killed." Walter's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it." "But that's the point, Walter," she whispered. "You can't control all of it." The river thundered behind them, relentless and indifferent. That night, Walter walked the bridge alone again. Halfway across, he stopped. On the far bank of Red Mesa, a small crowd had gathered quietly. On the Dry Hollow side, another group stood the same way, not shouting, just watching, waiting. He felt it, then the weight of expectation pressing from both sides. They didn't just want a bridge, they wanted victory. And he was the man holding the hammer. Footsteps approached behind him. "Mary, you don't have to carry their hatred," she said softly. He didn't turn. "If I walk away, it wins. And if you stay," he finally faced her, "then I risk losing everything." Her voice lowered, "including me." The question lingered in the night air. Walter stepped closer, close enough to feel her warmth against the cool wind. "I don't want to choose between this bridge and you," he said. "Then don't," she whispered. He shook his head slightly. "It won't be that simple." In the distance, thunder rolled again, closer this time. Storm season was coming, and so was something worse. The bridge stood halfway complete, stretching bravely across the divide. But the deeper divide, the one in people's hearts, remained wide, and Walter was running out of ways to hold it together. The storm arrived without mercy. By dawn, the sky had turned the color of bruised iron, and the wind tore through the valley with a howl that rattled shutters and sent loose boards skittering across dirt roads. Walter was already at the riverbank when the first heavy drops of rain struck the half-finished bridge. He had known the season would test the structure. He just hadn't expected the river to rise this fast. "Secure the ropes," he shouted, as thunder cracked overhead. "Tie off anything not bolted down." Men from both towns rushed into motion, but fear moved quicker than cooperation. The river, once fierce, now became monstrous, swollen, and violent, smashing debris against the wooden supports. Mary stood on the Red Mesa side, skirts soaked through, hair pulled loose by the wind. She should have stayed in town, she knew it. But she couldn't remain inside, while everything Walter had fought for threatened to be swept away. A massive tree trunk slammed into the outer support beam. The entire structure groaned. Walter felt it beneath his boots, a shudder that ran through timber and bone alike. "If that west brace gives," a dry, hollow carpenter yelled, "the whole center span goes with it." Walter made his decision without hesitation. "Anchor line," he barked. "I'm going out." "You'll get killed," someone shouted. "Not if we move fast." Before anyone could stop him, Walter tied a thick rope around his waist and climbed onto the shaking frame. Rain blinded him. The river roared beneath like a living beast, clawing upward. Mary's heart slammed against her ribs. "Hold the line steady," she ordered, grabbing the rope alongside two Red Mesa men. The west brace creaked violently as another surge struck it. Walter crawled across the slick planks, hammer clenched between his teeth, iron spikes tucked into his belt. He reached the brace just as it splintered further. Working fast, he drove the first spike into the joint, rain mixing with sweat and river spray. Each hammer strike felt like a battle cry against the storm. Another surge hit. The rope jerked tight. Walter nearly lost his grip. "Don't let go," Mary screamed over the thunder. On the opposite bank, men from Dry Hollow grabbed the line too. For once, no one hesitated over which side they stood on. It held together. Walter secured the second spike, then the third. The brace steadied but barely. A final crash of water sent splinters flying. Yet the support held. "Pull him back," someone yelled. They hauled the rope with all their strength, dragging Walter across the shaking planks until he collapsed onto solid ground. The storm raged another hour before finally easing. When it passed, silence fell heavy over the valley. The river still churned, but the bridge remained standing, scarred, soaked, battered, but unbroken. Walter lay on his back in the mud, staring at the clearing sky. Mary knelt beside him, brushing wet hair from his face. "You're a fool," she whispered, voice trembling. He managed a weak smile. "Maybe," for composure cracked then. Tears mixed with rain as she pressed her forehead against his. "You could have died, but I didn't." Around them, men from both towns examined the structure together, pointing, discussing repairs, not arguing. They had held the line side by side, and they knew it. By late afternoon, as clouds parted and sunlight touched the valley again, something had shifted. The storm had forced them into unity. No speeches, no negotiations, just survival. The mayor of Dry Hollow approached slowly, removing his hat. Across from him, Red Mesa's councilman did the same. "Bridge held," the mayor said gruffly. "Because we held it," the councilman replied. Walter sat up carefully, wincing. Mary helped him to his feet. "You see," she said softly, "they can stand together." Walter looked at the structure stretching across the river, damaged, yes, but stronger for the test. "So can we," he answered quietly. But even as hope flickered in his chest, he noticed something else. Near the edge of the riverbank, half hidden beneath washed-up debris, lay a small, oil-soaked rag. Not storm damage, not accident, intent. Walter picked it up slowly. Someone had prepared to burn the bridge. The storm had interrupted them. Mary saw the understanding darken his expression. "It isn't over," she murmured. "No," Walter agreed. The river had tested wood and iron. Now people would test courage. And if fire came next, it would not be from the sky. It would come from within the valley itself. The bridge was finished 3 weeks after the storm. Repairs had strengthened what the flood tried to tear apart. Fresh beams replaced cracked ones. Iron brackets reinforced every joint. What once looked fragile now stood firm against wind and water. But timber and iron were never the real problem. It was people. Word spread quickly that the bridge would open at noon on Saturday. No ceremony had been planned. No ribbon waited to be cut. Walter had insisted on something simpler. If it's meant to connect them, he had told both councils, then let them be the ones to cross. By late morning, the entire valley gathered on opposite banks. Dry Hollow stood stiff and watchful. Red Mesa mirrored them. Mary remained near the front of her town side, hands folded tightly together. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing formal, just the quiet dignity she always carried. Walter stood at the center of the bridge, alone. The river moved steadily beneath him, calmer now, but still powerful, as though reminding everyone what once kept them apart. The silence stretched long. Walter felt every eye on him. If no one stepped forward, the bridge would become nothing more than wood above water. He walked to the Red Mesa side first. A murmur rippled through Dry Hollow. Mary's breath caught as he approached her. He stopped just a few feet away. "I built this for both of you," he said loudly enough. "For everyone to hear, not for one town to claim. Not for one town to control." He turned, facing both sides equally. "This bridge doesn't belong to Dry Hollow. It doesn't belong to Red Mesa." He paused. "It belongs to whoever is brave enough to cross it." The words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mary stepped forward. Her boots touched the first plank. Gasps echoed softly behind her. She did not look back. She walked steadily across, eyes locked on Walter's. Every step sounded louder than it should have. Wood against leather. Courage against fear. When she reached the center, she stopped in front of him. "You said rivers shouldn't decide who we speak to," she said quietly. Walter nodded. "Then, let's not let pride decide either." She took his hand. The gesture was small, but it broke something open. An older rancher from Dry Hollow stepped forward next. Then, a Red Mesa carpenter. Slowly, cautiously, people began crossing from both directions. They did not rush, they did not smile much, but they walked halfway across. Neighbors who had not spoken in years found themselves standing face to face. Awkward nods were exchanged. A few quiet greetings. No fights, no accusations, just movement. The bridge held, not just physically, emotionally. Walter felt something inside his chest, loosened for the first time since he arrived. The tension he had carried for months eased as boots crossed behind him in both directions. Trade would come later. Agreements would take time. But this moment mattered more. Mary stepped beside him as the crowd slowly mixed in the middle. "You chose the bridge," she said softly. Walter looked at her. "I chose what gives us a future." "And what about us?" she asked. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I was hoping we could stand in the middle together." Her answering smile was brighter than the sun overhead. Behind them, Dry Hollow and Red Mesa mingled cautiously. Children weaving through adults who no longer looked like enemies. The river still flowed beneath the structure, but it no longer divided the valley. It connected it. Walter had come to build timber and iron. Instead, he built trust. And though the scars of the past would not vanish overnight, the first step had been taken across planks, laid by steady hands, and strengthened by shared struggle. As the afternoon light warmed the valley, laughter, quiet at first, began to rise. Walter squeezed Mary's hand gently. "Some bridges are measured in feet and boards. Others are measured in courage. This one was both, and it would stand for generations, not because it could not fall, but because people would no longer let it." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.